Welcome everybody to this episode of the Forgiven podcast. I think we're on like 23, 24 or something like that. I'm Pastor Logan. Pastor Mike isn't able to join us today, but don't worry, we have an incredible guest with us today. She's a friend of mine. We worked together for a little while, and she's incredible. She's like does worship and young adults, and then she handles a lot of like producing good content and stuff. And so we have a friend of mine. Is it Director of Creative Ministries? Is that correct? Is that the actual title?
That's the actual title.
Okay. I was just going to say creative director, but I like to try to be as professional as possible. So we have the Director of Creative Ministries from the Neighbourhood Church in Saskatoon, Ashley Drayton, joining us on today's episode. So say hello.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be here. As it said, Logan and I got to work together for a little bit, which was a fun time. And then he took off, and now he's doing all these other great, amazing things. So glad to be here, honored to be here, to be part of the ministry that you're a part of.
Absolutely. And it's funny when I talk about, I like context. And if you know Strength Finder, context means you're very historical. And that's my top strength, is leaning back on history. And so I'm often talking about my time when I worked at the neighborhood and stuff. And when I was bringing up this idea of having you on and everything, I was like, I didn't quite know how to explain like all that you do, because it's like you have such a wide portfolio, just like myself.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I don't know how else to describe it, but saying that like Ashley is just maybe the better version of what I was when I was over there. And so everybody gets a good chuckle about that. And so
we're all unique in our versions, man. There's things that I look at, I'm like, man, how many times did I message you when I first started and you had left? I'm like, Logan, I need your help.
That's what we do. And I'm joking a little bit. It's all good. But so I have Ashley on because I want to talk about the creativity that goes into the ministries that we do. And
wow.
I think I'm a creative person. At least I'm very more left-brained, you would say. I'm a big thinker. I like to dream. I have all these crazy fun ideas. And I think, Ashley, you're very much the same way in that regard. And I want to know how we use that to pursue ministry, how we use that to push the church forward. So for us, it's this podcast, right? For Bethel, it was this podcast, and some of our social media stuff that we're doing is trying to reach the online community. It's trying to push us online, because whether we like it or not, COVID kind of forced us to do that. And I think a lot of churches fell behind in that regard. And so much of our time is spent online that I kind of came to the conclusion. I was like, well, if you can't beat them, probably join them, kind of thing. So like, let's start filling the internet and all these places with good, wholesome, like Christian and ministry based, like, content. And so that's what we're doing, but you also are doing that as well. And I just wanted to kind of, there's a bit of an opening question, but like, what do you do? What is it that you do?
Sometimes I ask myself that question, but there's a lot that I'm doing over here at the neighborhood. And one of the big things is that I'm in charge of all of our music ministries. And so we have quite a few different teams, and they're growing teams, which is exciting, but trying to lead those teams in authentic worship, where it is, of course, honoring to God, and we're trying to do our best in our capabilities with the gifts that God's given us, but to also create a space that's authentic and a space that people feel that desire to enter into worship in the music side. So that's one side of my job, is working within the structure of the services, everything like that, and what they look like, and making sure everything's running well, and having the tech teams running and people knowing what they're doing. And so there's that whole realm, which I feel like is a lot of the weekend work. And then during the week, on my Tuesday, Wednesday days, especially, I help with one of our venues, which is an online venue that looks very different to church in the traditional sense. But it's an online venue called Unedited, and it is an online service where we just talk about life together. We go into our community, we try to support local, we see what's going on in the city and surrounding areas. And then we talk about God, and our goals are to discover God, discover purpose, and discover community. And so we're trying to figure it out day by day. We've done it for a year now, which it's crazy to even think that a year has gone by. Our first official episode was November of last year. So we have 1 year in, and we're still going, and we're trying to continue to be creative and to have different ideas, and to also recognize that it's okay to repeat things. Like, it's okay to
Yes,
have things, staple things that you go back to, where it's like, this is an annual thing, like this is what we do. And then on
absolutely.
top of that, there's also young adults, and then the other creative stuff. That's where like I don't know what I do half the time, where I do know, but there's just like little things that you're just checking off every day, you know.
Absolutely. And I have to say, I can't believe it's been a year of unedited.
Mhm.
I'll be honest, I don't watch every episode just
That's okay,
because,
man.
but I try to. I at least always catch up if I can. And what's crazy to me is like I was like kind of on the ground floor of unedited. I kind of like
Mhm.
helped like kind of launch it a little bit, and
Yeah,
seeing like where it's come. I'm like, yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad I'm not like doing it. I'm glad I can just enjoy it as like a
yeah.
person that just like I'm glad I'm on for the along for the ride, because it's like it's a great ride. And I still, and I think I told this to you, and I'm gonna mention it again. You guys need to release those as audio only episodes somehow.
I know, that's a goal and that's a hope, and we're getting there. It's just more so the time to do it well, because 'cause I'm someone
Yes,
where I don't wanna do anything just, like, half. I wanna
yes,
do it well, and it's not that we have to be great at everything. I know that Pastor John talks around here that good is good enough sometimes, where we're just like, "It's okay to be good, but I wanna make sure it's still done well and that it can be, like, a strong part of a ministry." So,
and
I know you told me about it, and ever since you said that, it's in the back of my mind. It's
yeah.
ready. It's waiting.
I thought I'd throw that in there because now the internet can keep you accountable, I guess. No, just kidding. Um, and that's kind of, I guess that's going to lead me into the next question of how do you then balance all of those different ministries? Because in my work, I have to be very creative in one side,
Mhm.
but then on Sunday mornings, right, and Saturday nights and Sunday mornings for you guys, you have to be in that right headspace to be a leader. Not that leaders can't be creative, but you have to. It to me, it's a different headspace, right? Like on Sunday mornings, I'm not creative. I am in the mode of I am the leader. I am directing. I am saying, hey, we're gonna do this. Like you're managing. You're making
Yeah,
sure fires don't happen. You're getting volunteers in place and all of
yeah.
these things. And so for me, I find those times like I love them because I love the relationships that I get to build. Um, but they're also the most stressful sometimes. And it could be a perfect, everything could be going perfectly well. There couldn't
Mhm.
even be any problems. But it's just the fact that it's so counterintuitive to what I do other times that I got
Yeah.
to find that right balance. You know what I mean? Like,
No, definitely. I think that that's one thing where I guess, like, I can't help but thank God how He's created me, in the sense of I do feel like I'm very much an ambivert, where I have that introverted side and I have that extroverted side. And I feel like my Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, when I'm in the office, that's a lot of the time where I'm doing a lot of the creative aspect of things, where it goes from filming or editing or trying to be like, okay, I don't like what this looks like, and all these different areas. And then the weekends is where I have that like total extroversion, and I get around everybody, and you're with people and you're trying to manage people and you're trying to make sure everything's running properly, and all the hiccups that happen, and the calls to people to be like, I need your help, I need this, yada yada yada. And I think that a lot of it has become for me getting into a form of routine, which is good but also can be really challenging, because when that routine is ripped up because something else happens and you're working with people and you don't have the things that you need, that's where I feel like those moments of chaoticness kind of thing. And so, but a lot of it has become like, I know what I'm doing Tuesday. I know what I'm doing Wednesday. I know what I'm doing Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. Like, I know what's happening each day. And I think that has allowed the process to not become emotion, but simply allow my brain to kind of know where I'm going and what I'm doing at each day and in each
yeah,
situation. And sometimes that has to flip around a little bit, and we have to be flexible in ministry, which can be difficult when you want it a certain way.
absolutely. Oh man, I uh I could so just to give the audience a little bit of behind the curtains, I guess. I've been trying
Mhm.
to get this episode specifically scheduled. I think I asked you in like October. I think
Yeah.
was the very first time I floated the idea to you. And it's no one's fault but my own, really, because
It's
I
shared.
I I'm still new to this kind of like scheduling and all this kind of stuff. I'm not very administrative. Who would have thought, right? The big ideas creative guy isn't very administrative. But so when it comes to like scheduling guests for the podcast or just other projects that we're like working on, for me, I can't look too far in the future. If I look too far in the
Yeah.
future, I get overwhelmed. I don't know what to start looking at.
Mhm.
So for me, some people set their schedule 2 weeks in advance or 3 weeks in advance. For me, but Monday, I get into the office. That is the first thing I do. I sit down and I look at all the projects I have ongoing, and I'm saying, okay, I'm doing this, this, and this for that week. And that works for me, doesn't work for other people, and that's okay. And so for Ashley, I kept asking her on like Monday. I was like, hey, does this week work? Does this week work? And then I'm glad you finally said something. We're like, hey, can we plan this like 2, 3 weeks in advance, because like that's how you work. And
Yeah.
for me, it was actually a good thing, because it made me think like, oh right, I can't just assume everybody works the same way that I do in that regard. And so I'm finally happy that we got this on the books, and that maybe it can, break up, just bring some fun and levity to the busyness that is Christmas,
Yeah.
as well. Because as we both know, we've both done like creative ministries around Christmas and everything now. And as we're in the Christmas season, and this is going to be a Christmas seasoned episode, and when it comes out, I want to talk about like creativity at Christmas, because
Yeah.
churches across the globe seem to go just explode around Christmas, and they make these like amazing, grandiose, like experiences for
Mhm.
Christmas. And don't get me wrong, they're awesome. Like
Yeah.
they're fun and all that. But I'm gonna be honest, I'm glad I don't miss planning that kind of stuff. I don't miss being in charge of that kind of stuff. Like I don't have to do their Christmas Eve here. I just have to show up and do a reading and be done. Like I don't have to do anything, and it's been
Good to
so
go.
nice. I'm still helping and doing a bunch of other stuff, but it's like I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the creativity that goes into like planning those big services, into like
Yeah.
Christmas and all that kind of stuff, because I'm sure you guys are probably doing something pretty unique.
Well, and there's so many aspects of the creativity that comes around Christmas, and some of it is simply like even when it starts about is decorations, and that is not a place where like I I could excel if I wanted to, but I don't have the brain space to. So we have an awesome volunteer here who's just like, okay, these are all the things we've thought about for the Christmas decorations. Can I go? And I'm like, you go, you do. I trust
Hmm.
you. I know you're going to do good. And so that was one thing that has like completely lifted off my plate where I can just be like, you know what? That's what leadership is too, is just delegating people who are excited about it and want to volunteer about it. So Sharon has been great with that so much. She's just so wonderful. And so she came to me like 2 months before. She's like, all right, this is the day we want to plan. This is the day we want to decorate. I'm like, you do you, give her. But the one thing I find here is that we have three big services around Christmas, which is our Blue Christmas service, which is actually coming up pretty quick this weekend, and then Christmas Eve, obviously, coming up. And we have two services on those days. And it's a big thing to organize and get all the different volunteers. But at the same time, like I look at what we do here, and there's a beauty in the simplicity of both the services. Is that it's not an epic, amazing concert, which I think that so many churches do so well, and I'm so thankful for them, but there's a beauty in the simplicity where it's volunteers coming in and singing Christmas carols together, where it's different musicians that have their ability to be creative to do specials, and so we have different specials in the different services. And part of my job for being creative in these services is simply to kind of ask that question. Will you sing this? Will you play this? Will you do this? And there's often a lot of volunteers who won't respond to the big emails that I send out that are like, we need people to do specials. But if you tap someone on the shoulder and say, hey, I think you do really good at this,
Yeah.
would you consider? And that's what makes the services special, is that you have people from the community simply loving Jesus and doing what they're gifted at and simply being there and worshiping in these Christmas songs together. And you have a community that we have right now. And the one thing I love about the Neighborhood Church is that it is so diverse right now. And I love it with just so many different cultures and things like that within it. And so you have this area of the city that we're in that is full of diversity in that culture, coming in and inviting people in and saying, hey, why don't you come on out and be a part of this celebration? And they can see people in the community there. You see
Yeah.
people that invite their friends, even if they're like, hey, I'm singing a song at this service. Someone who doesn't know the Lord may come just to support a friend, but then be given the chance to experience the gospel as well.
Absolutely. It's funny how you said like simplicity. From what I know, that's exactly what our Christmas Eve service is as well. It's just really
Mhm.
simple and clean, and you know and for me, like, I'll be honest, I never understood Christmas Eve services all throughout Bible college, all this kind of stuff. I just didn't grow up in that household where we
Yeah.
were like Christian and stuff like that. So for me, Christmas Eve was, playing a 3 hour game of Risk with your brothers and then getting in a fist fight because you get a bad dice roll. Um, so for me, it just never made sense. And so, uh, but having done a few of them and attended them, I see the the message and the heart and um,
Mhm.
the stuff that comes through it. And you're right. It is those Christmas Eve and the Easters and the like even like your kickoff type of things where
Yeah.
it's like that's where people are inviting friends, family, you invite the community, and that is
Mhm.
where like you're going to see um like the gospel come to life for
Mhm.
these people. And it to me is incredible the amount of people that come to some of our stuff because I simply put out like an Instagram post
Yeah.
or and to me it's actually been incredible the amount of like community involvement we've had
Mhm.
in the city of Brandon. That's Bethel's sort of motto is a church in the community for the community. That's what we try to model. And so for us,
Yeah.
we're constantly throwing it seems like every other week we have something that the community is invited to, and we
Mhm.
partner with like we. It's crazy. We did this fall carnival. It's an insane amount of work. I can't even. I don't even have to plan it. I just got to come and video it and hang out and stuff, and I set up and whatever. But I contacted a local radio station and was like, "Hey, like, do you guys ever do like just like ads?" Because I was like, I don't know, what wonder if it's real cheap. I don't know. I didn't know people still listen to the radio anymore. But
I
Brandon's and
do.
that I was learned people still do,
Yeah.
and so I was like, well, whatever. And they're like, oh, we know your church, we know what you do, and they gave us free radio spots because
Wow, that's awesome.
not like as much as like a paid person, but it was enough that like I had people coming in and I was shaking hands and being like, "Hey, like thanks for coming, blah 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 blah." And get to talking with them, and they're like, "Yeah, I heard about it on the radio," and I'm like, "What? You're on the radio?" And or Facebook ads. Holy man.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I don't know what I don't know if that's what even what you do. I don't know if you're the one promoting the events and stuff like that. But like insanely
Yeah.
helpful. Like I don't want to necessarily talk too much about the technicalities of what we do, but I was blown away
Mhm.
with like the amount of like response that came from these and
Yeah.
like people honestly coming up to me and being like, "This is so fun. I'm going to come back. All my kids loved it," and all these things. And it's like all because like we put in a little bit of work to get like this, like just to put the message out there like
Yeah.
wider and bigger and stuff. And I was just like blown away. And so I'm love that you talk about that with
Yeah.
Christmas Eve and inviting people and stuff. Cause I don't know about you, but I think sometimes a lot of the ministry that I do, whether it's making a social media post or spending time photoshopping and creating, and you put it out there, and you might not be the most proud of your work, or it might be
Mhm.
something that you look and you're like, oh, I could have changed this and that. And maybe get a little discouraged, and you're like, well, I don't know if this is gonna work. And
Yeah.
it's hard to see the fruits of your labor sometimes when we create and do all these online ministries. But seeing people come in because of that is like really nice. So I
Well, and
just
that's where it just like I laugh because I was even talking to one of my friends this morning actually about just like how sometimes we create things and even when it comes to graphics and you create something and you like of course people want options, which is good. And a lot of the times I ask people like what are your hopes of this so I can if I can know what someone's looking for, it's easier to create something
yeah.
that is what they want. But how many times like I have like 2 or 3 that I spend like so much time on, I'm super proud about, and then there's 4 and 5 where I'm like, "I'll just throw these 2 together," and those are the ones they choose, and you're like,
I
"Come on."
know. You're like, come on. Oh,
Like, "Okay, fine, yeah, that's the one, sure."
I could relate to that so much. Like it's I wanted to ask, are you sick of editing videos yet? Are you tired of
So some of them have become like so we have also we put one of our services online,
yeah.
even though it's not live stream anymore. You guys had set up a brilliant live stream thing here, which was awesome. And then when we opened the churches up more, I was like, you know what? I don't need this stress. And we still post it up for people to see on Sundays, and people are watching it, which is great. But that video has become very like I know what's going into it. And so
Yeah.
that one isn't necessarily there is creativity, of course, always that goes into it that's underlying that you don't necessarily recognize that you're using sometimes.
Yeah,
But that
absolutely.
one has become where I'm not thinking as much, where I'm like, "Okay, gotta get this in here, done." And then with unedited, even though it is called unedited, it means unedited life more so. Um,
Yeah.
and so the nice thing about that one is that the in studio shots are unedited. The only thing that we do is like put in the titles and throw them in there. Like they get
Yeah.
basically one go. I think there was one time we had to re-record because I messed up something with the camera and it didn't record proper. But that was my fault.
Been there, done that. Don't worry.
Yeah. And so, but then there's the little snippets in the middle that are, of course, edited. And sometimes it's not that I get sick of editing. Half the time, if not 75%, I'm filming and I go, I have no idea what I'm going to do with what I filmed.
Yes. Yep.
And
Yep.
you have, like, say for a 1-minute video, I've taken like 45 minutes of film, and I'm just like, how do I make this impactful sometimes? And you're just like, that's more so like, how do you know choose what to you choose? And it all comes out, it flows, and as you do it, you figure it out. And some videos take me an hour to create, others take me like 5 hours. I'm like, why did that take so stinking long?
Hmm.
But it's not that I get sick of it, it's more so it's just, like, trying to find and pull those pieces out of your brain to be like, "Okay, just work." And sometimes it means stepping away and being like, "I need to come back to this in 2 hours."
I, that is, I think, a lesson that I wish I had learned so much more early on.
Mhm.
In that, I mean, I don't have to do nearly as like complex edits anymore. Like I don't have to do unedited where you shoot for like an entire day and then
Yeah,
have to break it down into half an hour. We get some of that.
yeah.
But I asked that question only because I know a lot of other creative types that I've talked to just in my own life and ministry and stuff. They can come up with the big idea and they can have all the fun and they could even, but when it comes to doing the work after, it's almost like it's a separate skill set. It's
Definitely.
and I mean that's why we have like the world has professional editors and all these things. But I don't know if I could completely relinquish that out of my out of my job. Like I do love editing. I get sick of it, of course, because it
Mm.
is a little boring, especially when I'm trying to find sermon clips and I've listened to the same message, 4 times, and I'm trying to find that perfect 30 seconds for an Instagram reel. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, okay, well, and then, yeah, for me, it was one of the things in just ministry that I've done that I love, but then I hate it. I learn, and I don't know. It's just one of those things that I try to ask all creative types because it, yeah, I'm happy that you aren't getting tired of it, or at least that you have like a coping mechanism, we'll say, to be like, if you are getting tired of it, you can step away and to do that. Because I think a lot of times in ministry and just in life, we try to push our way through something
Mhm.
and just persevere our way through it. And it's like, well, no, sometimes it's actually okay to take a step back, figure out a different plan of attack, and then come back to it.
And
And
I think the
so,
hard thing is not so much like because it is what I do for work now, I found that outside of work, sometimes I used to love, like, doing little things more and like that outside of work. I don't have that mentality to do
yeah.
that as much anymore. I think that's where there's been that little bit of a switch where I'll do it from time to time for, like, the gym I go to or something like that. We're doing a comp and I'll video and put something together, but that's because 'cause I'm competitive and I wanna win. Um,
That's
or
awesome though.
but so, like, little things there, but for sure, there's points where it's just like you have to ask other people too, and I think that's been one thing where delegation is huge. So, for example, pardon me. For example, even our social media, because I'm running multiple social medias, coming the new year, I'm going to be delegating one of our social media platforms to someone else. But that's
Good.
also through trust and through knowing that they're creative and it allows them to use their skills. So that's also just trusting people and asking people what their thoughts are and what do they think about this and having those and recognizing when people give feedback. It's not that you're not doing something well, but there's something else that you can look at because we have our views and what we find creative, but other people can have great ideas too. So just trusting that feedback isn't always a bad thing. Like, and I think that can be a scary thing to recognize because it's something personal. And I think with editing and creativity, because it is so personal, it's hard to receive feedback, even though feedback is a good thing.
Absolutely. Like that was one of the things that I used to hate getting feedback because I was I was arrogant. I was like, "You didn't spend your time making the video. You don't know what I did. You don't understand my
Yeah.
vision, and you come up with all these excuses." And it wasn't until, you know, third year of Bible college where I finally kind of learned my lesson and was kind of like, no, like it's actually like it makes you better to receive
Yeah.
feedback. Like that's the whole point. And it's not that they're trying to be mean. I mean, and that's the thing. You have to learn how to differentiate the actual like mean comments and
Hmm.
somebody actually trying to give like healthy feedback. And I think a lot of people just aren't very good at the discernment on somebody trying to be healthy and give you honest feedback and somebody just trying to break you down.
Yeah.
um, which is, I mean, we could talk about that later, but um, for me, like feedback is like huge. So now, like, when I like post stuff, I get somebody to look it over. Like I will
Mm.
say like, "Hey, how does this look?" Like if I'm uncertain about something or
Yeah.
like whatever, I'll call in one of our administrators and I'll be like, "Hey, like can you watch this?" Like you don't like you know, you maybe you I try to do it especially if they weren't there on Sunday. If
Hmm.
I'm making like a clip or something related to see if they can get the point of it or
Yeah.
whatever. And then I'm not afraid for them to be like, "Actually, Logan, that's really not good. Go and find something else." Or and stuff. And for me, I also have to get somebody to spell check everything for me. I
Yeah.
am I am the worst speller typeist, whatever. Like I misspell things constantly. And it's because I'm
Yeah.
trying to work so fast that I'm trying to work too fast. And it's something I'm trying to work on. I try to type at the speed of light because I know the faster I can get it done, the faster I can move on to the next project.
Yeah.
But um
Mine is dates. I constantly put the wrong dates, and I'm like, or times. I'm like, oh my
mm,
goodness. We had people show up to an event from a Facebook post an hour early. I'm like, why are you here? They're like, the event said 6. I was like, oh my
uh-oh,
gosh.
whoops. Yeah, I've done that. Or I misspelled people's names. That
Hmm.
and I'll be like, we had a guest and I was like, I misspelled their name and I didn't notice it. They were really nice about it. They didn't care. It was like one letter off and it's like a very hard name to spell. They didn't care, but I felt so bad. I like went up to them, apologized like so many times and just was like, I'm so sorry, but they didn't care. But um I wanted to ask because we are
Yeah.
supposed to be a ministry related question podcast.
100%.
Um what I want to can you share a story of how God has moved in
Mhm.
in the creativity, like in unedited, in the services, things that like
Yeah.
that you've seen happen?
Well, I think that there's so many aspects. Goodness, that's a big question. Like there's
Yeah.
multiple ways that I could answer that. And I think that one of the incredible things with ministry online is that you don't know who's watching. And I think it's an area where it's less scary to interact with Christianity and interact with people starting to kind of look at the church and look at who God is and to kind of take that step away from a building and from people because we're all sinful people trying to do our best and we all have our faults and things like that. But somehow with online ministry, it's a little less scary because you're in the comfort of your home, but
Yep.
the hard thing is that you can press pause, stop whenever you want to never hear the the finale of what's being said. So there are like there's challenges there. But I think just knowing of some of our listeners and knowing about some of the people who I know are listening to unedited, who I know are not following the Lord, seeing hearts soften towards God. And I
Mhm.
think that's a really incredible thing with unedited, especially because there's people I know that are watching it and who are listening and hearing, and you don't know what God's going to do with that. And as well with music ministry at the church, where that's a huge passion of mine. It's where my heart is in so many ways, and there's so much more that I want to be doing, but again, it's just time and trying to figure out how do we get everything into a 24-hour day and still have rest and make sure we're not overworking, because that's not a healthy way to
Yep.
be, and your ministry is going to fail if you're overworking, honestly.
Absolutely.
And but seeing how others connect with God through music. And I think that again there is, as I said, there's a vulnerability in creativity where we allow ourselves to be vulnerable. And the hard thing is that we're always on. People see what we're doing, they know our job, everybody sees it. It's not like one person sees it, everybody sees it. And so I think that having that vulnerability in what you're doing and being honest in it is that I think that one thing I've seen even within our the people ministering in this church is that I allow people to see my heart as much as possible and my heart for God, and see that in through what I do and how I work, and giving them the freedom to worship in the midst of also performing in an extent, because realistically, like worship ministry, there is a performance aspect to it, because if you don't practice, if you don't work together, if you don't know how to actually play the piano or play the drums, it's not going to go well together. So there is that
Absolutely.
performance aspect, but allowing people to have that freedom, I'd say that's one of the things that's just been really fun to watch. And we had a worship night specifically a couple months ago where I brought together a team, and a lot of the people singing were some of our leaders of our key teams. And watching them enter into a way of worship where they just had freedom, where our keyboardist just played piano and they all just worshiped and they sounded amazing. And
Mm,
all the instruments followed everyone so well that they sang, and they gotten to that point of freedom where they had practiced so much, but they also brought in a lot of things that they had never practiced. They didn't have the sheet music in front of them, they didn't have the words, but they were just authentically worshiping God in such a cool way. I was doing sound that night and I just sat there and I was like, oh my goodness, like this is powerful. And it was
yeah.
just such an incredible night of worship. And for me, and I think for the whole team, like there was just something different about that night, and my hope is to continue to grow that through all our services.
I love that. That is incredible. Some of the most amazing memories that I've ever had, whether it be, I mean, kids subtly, I'm not musical, which is good. I'm glad I'm not. And that's okay because for me, I love that you said that there is a performance aspect to what we do
Mhm,
because there is. It's not that you're going up there to perform. You are going up there to lead worship and to soften the hearts so that the Holy Spirit can move and God can speak to people. But you
100%.
do, but you have to do it with some level of excellence. You have to be
Mhm,
able to do it with it, and I always like to tell my volunteers, we don't serve with perfection, we serve with excellence.
mhm,
And we do our best, God does the rest type of mentality. And doing your best doesn't mean, doesn't mean you slough off and you don't practice and you don't, put your heart into it. That's not at all what it means. It means that it's just no matter where you're at in your life, in your journey, whether you had a hard day or whatever, that you come and you give that time and that your energy and your talents and your gifts to God to
yeah,
use. And um for me, like that's been like really, really an incredible thing for me to witness. And for me, it's not seeing myself witness or to worship and everything like that. I feel like as I've gotten older and just more, foundational in ministry, those heart to heart moments you have with God, they almost seem to become less as you kind of
mhm,
mature in Christianity. You have less of those, you know, messy cries at the altar. It kind of just seems like you get more mature and you just don't need that super hard, heavy divine intervention anymore because you realize you can get that daily and
mhm,
all that. But for me, what it is seeing like students. Almost all of my like tech team is students,
mm,
and we got a couple of um, older gentlemen and stuff that do it, but a lot of them are in like high school and even like junior
yeah,
youth, and seeing the excitement on their face when you ask them to come and like do something, and they're
mhm,
just so excited, and it makes my heart just like skip a few beats. And there was 2 weeks ago, or no, it was last Sunday, like just
yeah,
this week. And I had planned on just doing one of the positions myself because I was like, you know what? I've asked this volunteer to do a lot, give her a break, all that kind of stuff.
yeah,
And we had just had a rough week at the church. Our whole church was sort of reeling from some stuff, and I was exhausted. And
mhm,
she comes into my office, our streaming studio, and she's like, "Hey, like Pastor Logan, great to see you." Blah 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 blah. And she hands me a coffee, and she like didn't ask her to do it, anything like that. She
mm,
just like hands it to me. We sit down, we share coffee together, and she was like, "Hey, do you need help today?" And I was like, "Honestly, I do. Like I don't
mhm,
think I could do it." And she just like steps up just like that. She just was ready to go. And for me, that is like incredible. That's what is like, I know God is moving in that
yeah,
this teenage girl is willing to like step up and do that. It's incredible to me. And it almost brought me to tears. I was sitting there, I was kind of sitting in the
mhm,
back of my office on my laptop, like monitoring chat, and I'm like holding back tears because I was just so moved at like
Mm-hmm.
the way God was just like moving in this teenage life. And it goes to show that like and she does everything behind the scenes. She will never step foot
Yeah.
on stage or anything like that because she doesn't want to, but she's so happy and diligent and just like so good at what she does. And for me, like I think that's the side of the ministry that we don't always talk about. I
Yeah.
think in that like and you said it, like we run off of volunteers, and that for me is like what I love about like this online ministry is like online ministry, truthfully, and production ministry and worship and all the things have given so many more volunteer like opportunities that we then get to like implement people who have like certain skills and stuff. And like that's just like really incredible. So I'm happy that those leaders had that like breakthrough moment with God, and we're
Yeah.
able to just like worship freely and stuff, because I know like those that moment they'll remember probably forever, just like
Yeah.
I'm gonna remember last Sunday forever. And
Mhm.
that like it's incredible. And I want to encourage the people at home that are listening to this, you can have those moments too, and you don't
Yeah.
have to wait to do it on a Sunday morning kind
Mhm.
of thing. I think Ashley and I could both agree that God moves in your life all the time, and
Yeah.
if you're taking the time to seek His face daily, to read your Bible and to pray and to worship, um, you're gonna see like important movements of God come out through that. And
And sometimes you don't see it right away, and I think that's an
yes,
important thing. Like, there's a quote by Soren Kierkegaard that I love. It's brilliant. It's just been a big one in my life, and it's that, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. And it's something
mm,
that we need to remember because often we don't see those moments where God was working on us and doing things in our heart until a year later, you're like, "Oh, right, okay." But
absolutely.
and you're like, "That makes sense." Sometimes you see it in the moment and you recognize it in the moment, but if you look back in your life, you can see where your heart changed. You can see where softening came. You can
Yeah,
see where that person that was really hard to forgive, you've forgiven. And sometimes it takes time because you've forgiven them with the help of the Lord. You can just see that for how God is constantly working in our lives if we're allowing him to, because we're simply vessels. Like God wants to use us in amazing ways. He's the one that changes hearts, but we're the ones that are he's using to be his hand extended.
yeah, absolutely. I love that quote. I'm gonna have to look it up, because
I'll send it to you later. It's a
yeah,
good
thank you. Yeah.
one.
Now I want to also just briefly touch on this, and this could be a whole other episode. We talk about creativity, and we talk about like worship, and we talk about volunteering, and all these things. We're trying to like give some people some tangible things to do. And I want to tell people listening today who might think like, oh well, my skills aren't useful in the church, or I don't know how God could use this, or whatever. People seem to kind of think that worship is the only, like musical worship is the only
Mm,
way that we get to experience those loving moments and our worship to God. And I want to encourage you all that that's not true at all. That is a small
mhm.
portion of our worship and dedication to God.
Yeah.
And um just us doing this podcast is actually a form of worship, because we are using this time to honor God
Mhm.
and to lift up him and to help inspire others to do that. So if you're sitting there thinking, well, I'm not musical, or I can't do this, or I can't do that, that's okay. There is a position and a place for you. And
100%.
I've said this a lot, and I'll keep saying it. I think church is like a football team. There is a position for everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. And whether that's maybe you're really good at keeping stats. You know what? That's really just as important as the quarterback throwing the passes. Okay. So it's like, just, I want that to be clear that if we've talked a lot about like music and creativity, but if maybe you're really creative in other areas, or maybe you're not, there's still a place for you. We want to encourage you to do that. And because like worshiping God is like one of the most like influential things that you can do, to the people around you and even to yourself in your
It's so
terms.
true because you look at even people who are running like our Pro 7 presentation computer, if you don't have someone there, like it makes a big difference. As soon as that computer breaks, which it has on me in the middle of a service, everyone's just like, I don't know what to do. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, everything's going downhill. But that's like because it's such an important position. And people are thinking, oh, I just click buttons. You're not just clicking buttons.
No.
When it comes to people being able to read and understand what you're singing, you are the one putting those words on there so that they know what they're singing and they understand what they're singing. You're the one helping. others to who don't hear. Like, I'm someone where I need to like read and listen at the same time sometimes to fully get that
Yeah.
comprehension. So in the middle of a sermon, by putting up the slide that has the scripture on it, that is huge. Because like I am all about still like tangible Bibles and things like that. But I
Yeah.
remember going to messages where I'm like trying to flip through and I was a new Christian and I'm like, I don't know where this scripture is. And then I miss like 10 minutes because I'm just looking for the first scripture that was being talked about. Like
Absolutely.
there's so many important roles. And sometimes it's not, if you don't know what your gifting is, it's about trying different things until you find it. It's also about listening to someone like one thing I recognize that you're really good at, Logan, is tapping people on the shoulder. And that was one thing that I heard a lot about is like, oh yeah, Logan would
Oh,
tap people on the shoulder because you saw something in someone. And
yep.
it's often listening to what other people are also saying in your life. Like someone taps you on the shoulder, maybe listen to what they have to say. Maybe they're right. Maybe just try it. See how you like it.
Absolutely. My Bible college theology professor used to say this to us, because in Bible college, at least if you're getting a degree, you have to do an 8-month internship, and
Yeah.
everybody stresses out about it because they're like, "Where does God want me? I don't know what to do. What if I go to the wrong place?" Or everybody freaks out, and with good reason. It's a big
Yeah.
transition, absolutely. But
100%.
shout out to Dr. Gabriel. One time in his class, he just kind of looked at all of us. It was like a third year class, so all of us were getting ready to do internships. And he looks at us deadpan, and he's just like, "I'm so tired of y'all whining and complaining and all this stuff about blah 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 blah." He's like, God's gonna tell you where to go, and guess what? If he doesn't, and you go to the wrong place, guess what? He's gonna be very quick to tell you and point you in the right direction. So he's like,
Yeah.
doing something is always better than doing nothing, because
And
he's
I
like, what?
think
Yeah.
go ahead, finish, and then I have a point.
Well, that was it. He's just
Yeah.
said something is always better than nothing.
And I think there's one thing that I can touch on with that where it was so when before I came back to this position, for those of you listening and you care, it's a whole other story, but I was living overseas and I was working in a at a school in Kenya. And there was a moment when I was coming for this position where I was sitting in my office with a dear friend of mine. And she said to me, Ashley, it's okay to stay, but it's also okay to go. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's important to recognize that God is going to use you where you are. And I do believe that sometimes there's places where you can be serving in either place and God is going to use you and it's going to be a good thing. And yes,
Yes.
God has specific times for you to be in certain places. I do recognize that as well. But sometimes we overstress that moment. And it was that conversation with her where she said, it's okay for you to stay and it's okay for you to go. Where I have one of the most tangible times where I've ever felt like God's presence because it was if I had this huge weight on my shoulders, like thousands of pounds of weight where I was just
Mm-hmm.
completely stressing and not knowing if I was making the right choice or not making the right choice. And that comment, I do believe was God speaking through her because it was like this weight was just lifted completely. And I felt so free. I remember I was just in the best mood after that. I felt energetic and it was almost as if there were like it was just gone and I could
Yep.
be in that present where I was and I can make a decision without that stress. And I think that sometimes
Yep.
there's those two places.
100%. I think uh, it's a hard lesson to learn. It really is, in terms of like, because we always like to think that God is going to give us that burning bush moment where he's going to tell you exactly what to do. And
Yeah.
God does do that. He absolutely
Oh,
has
yeah.
those moments where he tells you. But sometimes he puts two perfectly equal good opportunities in front of you and says, you
Mhm.
know what? You pick, because I'm happy either way.
Yeah.
And both are just equal right options. And so like I'm super happy and glad that your friend said that to you and that God was able to like speak to you in that moment, because you could the fear and the unknowing can really numb
Mm.
us, and it can just make
Yeah.
us so like still and everything. I remember when I left Saskatoon, I came back and worked at my home church for a little while, and it was one of those moments where I learned very quickly God tells you where he wants you to be, and
Hmm.
that just wasn't the place. It was for that moment, but it
Yeah.
wasn't a permanent thing. And
Mhm.
so I remember when I was in transition between churches, I called my good friend Devin, our good friend Devin, because who else
Oh.
who else am I gonna call, right? He's kind of the master of none, that guy. He's really smart. And
Very true.
I remember calling him and was like, "Man, I don't know what to do." I was like,
Mm.
I just was like, I was like, because not that Devin's not spiritual. He is. It's just he's not one to necessarily pat you on the back and tell you it's going to be okay. He'll just be straight up real with you and be
Yeah.
like, "Hey, look, this is what's going to happen or not going to happen. Get
Yeah.
real." And I needed that. And I was telling him all this stuff, and I'm so stressed, blah 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 blah. And then I moved over to the other church in Brandon, and I was telling him about that. And he's like, why are you so upset? He's like, you were where God wanted you to be for that moment. He's like, you can't
Yeah.
look back and feel guilty about it. You can't look
Yeah.
back and feel sad. He's like, God put you there for a moment, and maybe you'll never realize what that moment was, but you affected somebody.
Mhm.
And him saying that to me was like really impactful. I just was like, wow. It really reinforced the idea to me of like God puts us where you want to be. We just kind of have to be
Mhm.
willing to do that.
And willing to be used and willing to be in the moment and to learn from the experience, because sometimes the experience isn't good.
No,
Sometimes you have difficult things, but it's about learning to learn and accept that. And that's where I know some people think I'm too positive, and
never enough positivity.
because and I'm not always good at this, but I do believe that there's always something to learn in every negative situation. There's
Absolutely.
always something that you can get out of it, even if it is the loss of someone, there's something you can learn in the middle of that.
Hmm.
And you may not learn it for years to come, but there's always something to learn in our life. And no matter and that and I'm dulling it down. I could go deeper into this, but I do believe that if we look at what's happening, it creates us and allows us to continue to be who we are, and how we take that negative situation and turn it for good. And I
Absolutely.
think that goes to scripture completely, where
Yep.
in Romans, where it's talking about God doesn't give all these negative situations in our lives, but he can take that situation and use it for good. And I think that can tends to be misquoted in scripture a lot.
Absolutely.
But it's not that he's giving us all these horrible things, but he can take that and he can use it for good if we allow him to.
Absolutely. I can so relate back to just your story of leaving Kenya and how you felt
Yeah.
that weight being lifted off of you. So when I started here at my church currently, I had
Mhm.
no intention of coming here. I had zero intention
Mm.
because I just I didn't know it. I'll be brutally honest that I just didn't know. Like I just
Yeah.
didn't know anything about them. I'd never been there, nothing. And a good friend of mine, um, he like works here. He's the children's pastor. He calls me every summer. Ever since I've known him, he's called me every summer because he does like a traveling like children's ministry. So he goes to
Yeah.
camps and stuff. He calls me every summer and is like, "Hey, you got a job?" And every summer I've had to be like, "Yeah, it's all right, I have a job." Last summer I didn't, and I was like, "Actually, I don't. Like, I'm kind of looking for one." And he's
Hmm.
like, "Huh, okay." And then, we get to talking, whatever. And I did the most Pentecostal thing ever. I was like, "Oh, I'll pray about it." Which I did. I did faithfully go and pray about it, but it was more kind of a cheesy cop out answer because I just didn't have a decision. And
Yeah.
it's more spiritual and less like awkward if you say I'll pray about it than just saying I don't know. Maybe
And how
that's just
often do
me.
we say that and we're like, "Mm."
Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. So anyway, I think he saw right through me because he called me like every other day for like a month. I'm not
Oh
even
my
kidding.
goodness.
Because he just knew, and it was
Yeah.
God just constantly kicking the door and trying to be like, "Look, here's your opportunity. Are you gonna take it?" Like it. And so I remember I was gonna go help his parents move out of their house or something like that because I had nothing to do. I might as well go do something. And as I'm walking there, I had done a little interview, which I didn't know was an interview. He totally tricked me and was like, "Just come and have coffee with me." I was like, "Sure. You know what? I can come to the church and sit down and have a cup of coffee. They haven't seen you in a year or two, whatever." I come in and he immediately takes me to the head pastor's office. We sit down and we start talking. And I was like, "You son of a gun. You tricked me." I was like, "You tricked me real good." And it was a beautiful conversation. And then the next day, or day after or something, he calls me as I'm moving, and he's like, "Yeah, we want you." And I just in that moment just immediately said yes because it just felt right. And I
Yeah.
physically remember exactly what you were feeling, the
Mhm.
weight, like physically, like being lifted off of like your
Yeah.
shoulders. And I can remember like the smell in which the day was. It was this beautiful like
Mm.
June 1st day. It was so nice out, and I went for the super long walk. It's just like on the moon because you're so joyous and happy that the weight is
Yeah.
being lifted off of you. And I just want to tell the listeners too that are doing this, like Ashley and I talk about these experiences and they're great. And just know that God will give those moments to you as well.
Mhm.
It just is always on his timing. And sometimes we think that God's timing is wrong. It's never wrong. It's
I
just
often
always
think that.
exactly. We always
Well,
think that it's wrong, but God's omniscient and he knows what he's doing. And so we
yeah,
just have to kind of be willing to like wait through it and just know that it's one of those things that I'm sure you've heard this. God never gives you more than you can handle. That's a lie.
I was like, "Where are
God
you going here, Logan?"
God always gives us more than we can
Yeah,
handle so that we use him to rely on him to then push through the struggle. So if you're listening to this today and you're going through a transition or you're going through something or you're struggling with creativity at work or whatever, anything you're struggling with, just know that God is going to use that moment to make you better, to make you stronger,
yeah,
to make your faith bigger and stronger in him. So I just
yeah.
wanted to get that out of the way because we can talk about the good times and how we felt joyous about the situation, but just know that like it weighed on both of us a long time, I assume at least, in that regard. So just know that like good will come. It just you might have to go through some adversity first,
And it
and
takes trust, and that's if y'all could see, but I have a tattoo on my wrist, and it says trust. It says trust, and it's from Proverbs 3:5-6 to trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all
yep,
your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. It's
yes,
that trust, because sometimes your path feels like it's winding through all the mountains, and the funny thing is I have mountains above that tattoo, but
nice,
it's winding through all the mountains and you don't know which way it's going and turning and curving, and there's so many different things that are happening, but he will make your path straight, and he will straighten that path on his time. And it's important to trust, because trust is a huge part of our faith. It's a huge part of faith. Like, it is our faith, is to trust the
hmm
Lord. And that verse can be used so often, but it's something that I think I have to go back to daily, often.
absolutely.
And in those moments, because goodness, when you move, when you make a transition, when you do anything, when you decide to get in a car, you are trusting something and someone. And how often we trust other people in our lives, but we forget to trust the Lord.
hmm Absolutely. That's always my favorite analogy when I try to talk about faith to like kids or teenagers
Hmm.
and stuff like that. I say, well, you put your faith every day when you try to cross the street, right?
Hmm.
Like you have faith that that person's not just going to run you over, right?
Yeah,
It's a bit of a morbid example, but it really gets the point across. So like every time you cross a bridge, you have faith that those engineers took every possible like scenario
yeah,
into under account before they made it. And so um just know that God's got you. Just sometimes it might not always be when you want.
yeah.
But I want to ask you just like two questions, and they're sort of fun questions because we're kind of getting ready to wrap up. First of all, are you a team sloppy wet kiss person or are you an unforeseen kiss person?
Unforeseen kiss, 100%.
I can't put I can't put this episode out now. It's heresy. No, no, it's
Sorry,
fine.
I can't the whole, like, I remember hearing that song for the first time when it was, like, "Sloppy Wet Kiss." I stopped, I was like, "What the heck am I singing?"
Okay, fair enough. I can like I don't really care. I always ask this as just like a fun little banter that we could have between guests and
No,
stuff.
it's good,
I
it's good.
I prefer sloppy wet because it's the whole story behind it is if you don't know, let me try to change your mind real quick. So it's reminiscent of a dog. That's exactly what it's talking about. So dogs don't have the same perception of time that humans do. So when
Yeah.
you leave your dog for 5 minutes, you get the same reaction as if you leave for 5 days when you come home. They jump up, they give you a sloppy wet kiss, they're excited to see you, all that, because they don't know the passage of time like we do. They just know you're gone. And so it's the same thing that's said for God in that he doesn't care how long you've gone or all the things that you've done. He's just happy that you've come home. So that's the
Yeah.
heart behind it. I just don't like unforeseen because it leaves me to think of like just bad, like when I think of like unforeseen kiss, it makes me think of like I don't know how, if I just want to say it. It makes me think of like sexual harassment. It makes me think of sexual
Oh, goodness.
harassment. Because if it's unforeseen, it's like it's unforeseen. It's surprising and like that's bad to me. I don't know. I get yeah. Anyway, we
I
can move on.
appreciate I appreciate the analogy, and I like the analogy, but I still don't think I could sing that without being like
Oh, a friend of mine used to say there are two types of churches and they're both good. It's just you have to take a stance, unforeseen or sloppy wet. And he's like I don't know what each of them means, but he's like that's the stance you make. So
That's fair.
um And then I guess my last fun other question is,
Sure.
what is like the most fun time you can remember as like in the last like year you've been doing your job? Like what's the one like really fun memory that you can like tell? Like just something that was like it was so fun, you know what I mean?
Oh goodness, there's just been so many, um,
Or
which is a good
goofy.
thing.
You could even say embarrassing. I didn't want to say it, but
Oh, I'm trying to think now. I don't get embarrassed often, so that one's
yeah,
like
I don't either.
that one's like I laugh about things half the
Me
time.
too.
So even if it happens to me, I can feel super embarrassed in the moment. But goodness, I have a silly like goodness, I can't even talk now. One of my favorite memories even just happened yesterday. Like we were filming
Yeah.
Unedited, and this episode's coming out next week. It was just part of we were filming at my house of all places, and it was the silliest thing, like, all that happened was Yasmin took icing and, like, totally missed the cake, which was 2 centimeters from her, and we were all laughing so hard, but, like, we that's part of the filming, and so she's crying, I'm trying to produce, like, I almost, like, started, like, laughing so loud, and so you have that awkward, like,
Mm-hmm.
kinda
Yeah.
sound,
Oh yes.
and so that happened. I think just, like, our experiences with what we're doing with Unedited has been so special, um, where it's just so fun, and it's just so fun all the time, and we're laughing, and there's so many, like I put the bloopers in purposefully because that's just part of life, and that's what it is, and it's a joy to work with, yeah, Pastor Yasmin and Jordan, and just they're great people to work with, and so we have lots of fun, and I love that about my work and my job is that, yeah, there's days where you're frustrated, where things are hard, like, that's part of ministry and that's part of life, and don't for again, people listening, don't think that ministry is all these, like, happy-go-lucky moments where everything is just, like, wonderful and everybody loves each other all the time. We do love each other, but I can say sometimes we probably don't like each other all the time.
Absolutely.
But
I
but
Yep.
it's a place where I love coming to work, and I can honestly say that where when we're filming and there's times where we're tired and exhausted, there's things that happen where it's just a joy and you see God working through people, and it's been a lot of fun. I can't there's I'm sure I'll think of, like, many other thoughts later on, but that's the one today where we were
Yep.
and then Pastor John burned us so bad last night at our Christmas party. It was so funny. We made this cake and he was totally roasting us about how how it was.
Okay, that's extra funny for those that know Pastor John too. Like that's extra funny because he's normally not one to do that. So that's
It
really
was
funny.
hilarious.
Yeah.
It was good.
And I'm gonna say this on record now. We are going to have the guests, the
Yeah.
hosts of Unedited, on with Ashley at some point because I have worked closely with both Pastor Yasmin and Jordan. They were my mentors when I was in Saskatoon, and so like I just love and respect them so much, and like it's great,
It'll
and
be fun. It'll be fun.
it'll be yeah, it'll be something, and I'm really excited because I want to use this platform that we've kind of created to help other ministries spread, to just overall help the kingdom of God grow.
Amen.
Because that's what we're here to do. I'm not here to make Bethel Brandon better. I mean, I am, but I'm here to make the kingdom of God better, to make
Yeah.
the overall Christians across the world better. And that's what Forgiven's all about. It's about just taking somebody from, we like to use like a kind of like a video game analogy. If you're level 1 and you listen to an episode, then we want you to be at level 2 and level
Mhm.
3 and level 4. It's not a marathon, or sorry,
Mhm.
it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Yeah, I was gonna be like,
Yeah, no, it's that. It's taking your faith one step at a
Yeah.
time. And I really am happy that we had this episode finally, because I think you're able to share a lot of like good, unique insights into the creative process a little bit, and
Mhm.
just how people in the church can like use their gifts and talents, and how you do it as well. And uh, I would love to sit down and do a whole episode on like actual talking like nerdy kind of like real stuff about what we do, but that's not going to make a good podcast because
Everyone will be like, "What?"
everybody will be asleep. They'll be like, yeah, I mean, if they want something to listen to before they go to bed, sure. But thank you so much, Ashley, for coming on. It has been an absolute pleasure. I love that we get to do this and stuff. And
Yeah.
I hope that maybe we could have you on another time too, and maybe talk about. I would love to also. I was gonna ask you, but I didn't. I want to talk about maybe your specific story too, just like you personally, because you have a very unique journey in ministry that I don't even know that much about. So if that's something you'd
There's a
like to
lot
do
there,
sometime.
but well, for sure, we'll figure it out, and we'll schedule it more than a
I'm
week
not.
in advance.
Yes, I've learned this now. Don't worry. Don't worry.
But
I've learned
Logan,
my lesson.
honestly, thanks for having me on and for chatting. It's amazing to see the work that you guys are doing through this ministry, and just to watch even how much you've grown in the little bit of time that I've known you in the year, and just to see all the incredible things that you're doing. You have an incredible heart after God, and I hope that people listening and people around you continue just to see that, and that the work that you're doing, as you said, like we can continue to shine and to share each other's ministries, and just to see God's work happen
Absolutely.
and be done.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you're listening to this episode, thank you so much. Make sure you leave us a review on Spotify, Apple. I don't do it for any other reason than to actually know how you guys like the show or not. I'm not trying to get 5 stars to make us look better or anything like that. I want to know if you like what we're doing. So please leave us a review. Most importantly, share it. Just hit the share button, copy it, because like I don't do this. We don't do this to make money. We don't do this to anything but to just bring the gospel and ministry to the world. So please hit that share button, share it around. And I'm going to leave the unedited, probably YouTube channel in our description. So if you guys want
Instagram's our best one.
Instagram. Okay. I will find the Instagram and I will share it, and I'll put it in the episode description, because Ashley and the team, they do great work over there, and it's really fun. So I'm going to leave that in the description, and you guys can go and watch it. Thank you for listening to this episode of Forgiven, and we will talk to you guys next time.